Hello, my name's Ryan Littlestone from Forex Analytics and forexflow.live, and I'm going to speak to you about my thoughts for dollar yen going into and through 2023. But before we start on what I expect to happen in this pair through next year, we need to take a little bit of a look at what's happened this year, how we've got to where we are right now. Now, this story really started back in late 2020, early 2021. I was playing this from the long side, building up a long-term position because I saw that inflation was not going to be as transitory as what the central banks were making out. A lot of the central banks didn't even see inflation coming at that point. And it was a good trade that really kicked off in 2022 as we rocketed all the way up to 125 at the first instance. And I got some profit out there, got hit on a trailing stop behind that down in the 121s, but not even I could believe that we would see 150s in the months ahead. Now, what's been the driver for this trade and this pair in particular? It's come from two sides. Firstly, the US side. Obviously, inflation has picked up and that's forced the Fed into hiking rates. Now, they've been hiking rates quite significantly, and if we have a quick look at that chart of US interest rates, you can see the trajectory there, quite steep, and probably an unprecedented steepness in those rates going higher. And as I do this video today, they're set to go higher still, maybe up to that 5%, maybe even higher. So that's been part of the reason why we've seen the dollar side of the trade gaining so significantly, because the US is seeing this inflation coming in and it's forcing the Fed to go higher and harder on rate hikes. Now, on the flip side, we've got completely the opposite picture in Japan. We have a central bank who is still easing, who owns over half its government debt and is still buying government debt. It really is in a bit of a hole at the moment, Japan, and despite now seeing some inflation coming through the pipe, still not ready, it seems, to turn on monetary policy from easing to a more hawkish stance. And that's been one picture of divergence, if you like, between the US and Japan, and that has been really a double wind for yen weakness while we've had this dollar strength. Now we've had this intervention coming in from the Japanese authorities, which has put a bit of a lid on dollar yen for now, and we've seen some of the data in the US, particularly inflation, now coming lower from the peaks we saw earlier this year. So in the short term, we're seeing some dollar weakness, dollar yen weakness coming into play as we end 2022. So what are my thoughts going into 2023? Well, I've had a bit of a dollar bearish bias and sentiment for the last few weeks, really. I was expecting to see inflation coming off the boil, if you like, and that's been happening in the US. We've seen the CPI reports dropping and potentially the core turning around as well. I'm not so sure we're going to see inflation all the way back down to the Fed's target anytime soon, but what I'm looking for is where inflation is going to settle as it comes off the boil. There's still plenty of inflation pressures in there, so even inflation down to maybe 5-6% is still going to be way above the Fed's target. And I also believe that the market is underestimating how high Fed rates can go and where they can keep them to. I think they may be peaking at 5, maybe 5.25%, but I think that's going to be the very top for rates, and it's going to be a hard sell for Powell and co to push higher rates if we start to see inflation continuing to come lower, but also if we start to see the rest of the economy turning negative as well. So what I'm looking for really is maybe a bit of dollar bullishness. We've got the December FOMC to come as I do this video, and I think that's maybe one of the last hurrahs for Powell to really push the hawkish narrative. It's likely we get a hike. It's likely that those hikes maybe step down in size, but we are going to get the message that they are going to continue hiking until they see inflation under control. So as far as the dollar is concerned and dollar yen, I think there may still be some upside from here. We may get a look back into towards the 150s, at least the high 149s, and I'm going to be looking to scale in shorts for the longer term trade to get in on this weakness. Maybe the Fed getting to a top in interest rates. Now, on the other side, we have the Bank of Japan, and there's several things that are happening there. As mentioned, Japan is seeing some inflation coming in, and the Bank of Japan have been telling us that it's transitory and that they see inflation dropping back to 2% or below next year. Now, we've been watching inflation data pretty closely here at Forex Analytics, and it is trending higher. It could be the same situation where Japan sees inflation coming and they're not ready for it, just the same as the Fed and other central banks have got caught behind the curve. This may happen in Japan. So I'll be watching inflation in Japan to see if it continues ticking higher and if it's going to be more stubborn than the Bank of Japan expect. If that is the case, that could well finally force their hand into changing language, at least not being as dovish as they have been for the last few years. Now, on top of that, we have a bit of a risk event coming into the first quarter or the end of first quarter in 2023 when Bank of Japan Governor Kuroda ends his term and we get someone new in the hot seat. And there's going to be a lot of questions asked over who that's going to be and what their policy stance is going to be as well. Now, on that side, I'm expecting we're likely to get someone who's going to be roughly in the same mould as Kuroda, who's going to have the same ideas on policies, but we can't rule out that they will want to make their own mark, put their own stamp on the hot seat, and so maybe they may be getting ready to be tasked with finally looking to end Bank of Japan's policy. Now, of course, if we get the Fed stopping on hikes and maybe a recession hitting and then through 2023 looking at cutting rates, that's going to be negative for the dollar. If we get the Bank of Japan, if we get inflation in Japan rising, the Bank of Japan looking to maybe turn a little bit more hawkish, that's going to be a double wind. But on the other side of this trade, it's going to mean that the dollar sells off and the yen is going to strengthen. So two forces why this pair may pull back. Now, as far as trading levels are concerned, it's been a huge run up, and I'm for one, I'm not picturing us going all the way back down to 100. But if the winds are going to blow in that direction and blow quite strongly, I can well imagine this getting back to at least 110, maybe underneath, and then we'll see where we go from there. But in the interim, as I say, what I'm looking for into the end of this year, maybe the early part of this year, is a bit of a dollar rally to start scaling in some shorts in dollar yen to hold for the longer term and see if we get that move coming through the early part and the rest of 2023. So that's my thoughts for dollar yen, and I wish you a happy new year when you get this, and good luck for your trading in 2023. Thank you very much.